Hey everyone, I hope you all are having a great night. With that said, I have some creepy stranger stories for you guys to listen to, and I hope you enjoy. If you do, please leave a like or a comment. It really helps the channel, and also I love being able to talk to you all. And with that said, enjoy. So this story takes place in the rural farmland of the southeastern United States. For those from around the area, you'll know that there isn't much around, except for old farmhouse fields and the occasional subdivision. When I was around 17 or 18, I was dating a girl who went to the same high school as me. Being teenagers, we needed a place to be alone, and whatnot, better than the front seat of my F-150. Often it was hard to find a place to park that was away from the road, and it was also far away enough from everyone else. One evening as the sun was getting ready to set, I had remembered an abandoned house with a long driveway and a tobacco barn. It was off of some old back road with no other houses. I had been there before and explored the property. The house's roof had been abandoned long ago and currently had been used to store lumber. The house had no doors or windows, at least left, and the rest of the property was clearly in disrepair, and it didn't appear to be used at all. I figured this long-forgotten property would make a good spot, so I drove my truck up into the driveway, far away from prying eyes. I put my truck in park, lifted up my center console, and put on the radio. As my girlfriend and I were talking, she suddenly stops with her eyes glued to the rearview mirror and then says, I think someone is here. I initially blew her off, as I was fairly confident no one was around for miles. But as I glanced in my rear view, I had then seen a very beat-up looking Ford truck that pulled directly behind mine, and the door flew wide open. Out jumped a tall, dirty-looking man, holding what appeared to be a .306, with a weathered wooden stock. As I put down my window, the man advances, yelling all types of obscenity from the side of my truck. As he walks up, I hear the distinct sound of the safety clicking off of an older rifle. I froze as the world stopped all around me. I had never been held at gunpoint before. As soon as the shock wore off, I threw my hands up and I saw the man had his sights aimed on me through the rear window of my truck. I looked over to my girlfriend, who was frozen in shock and somewhat cowered into the passenger door. I remember feeling helpless and reaching for my pistol that I usually had between the seats, which I quickly realized I left at home. This was probably a blessing in disguise, as the strange man was clearly belligerent and under the influence of something. I'm sure him seeing my pistol would have just sent him more over the edge. As my hands are now up and my girlfriend shaking in fear, I eventually muttered out, "What's going on, sir?" The man through rotten and missing teeth then shouts, "You sons of bitches came out here tearing up my field and running my crops." He had clearly mistaken me for some of the ATV riders around the area who would often wander under private property and tear up the land. Looking at the man, he didn't look like any of the farmers that I'd known around the area. Having lived there 15 years at this point, I was fairly familiar with the local farmers. Well, the supposed farmer looked maybe in his early 30s, and he looked at me more like the junkies that I would see downtown. I replied to the man that I've never been here before, nor that I was responsible for destroying his crops. Trying desperately to defuse the situation, he wanted to hear none of it, and continued to mutter while still holding me at gunpoint. I waited for a break in his incoherent babbling to apologize profusely, and then say, "Sir, if I had seen a no trespassing sign, I wouldn't have dared step foot on the property." The man advanced from behind my truck to my open window to then yell, "Didn't see no fucking sign." Yeah, right. He didn't believe me. As I studied him, he continued to grip the rifle even tighter and mumbled to himself. I apologized some more and offered to leave when I noticed he had me completely blocked in. There was nowhere to go. As soon as I mentioned leaving, he parked up and dropped the rifle ever so slightly. Then, putting us out of immediate danger, my fight or flight briefly chose flight. But I knew there was no way to jump out of the truck and then get to him before he could shoot us in time. Time seemed slow, and I felt like the silence that ensued lasted for hours. He had started to yell obscenities yet again, but I started to walk back to his truck as he passed my rear bumper. My girlfriend and I exchanged glances. I had never seen a fear like that in someone's eyes before, let alone someone that I loved. I knew that I had to do whatever I could to get away from this unhinged stranger. I fired up my truck and put it into reverse as he does the same. The beat-up Ford backed into the road and stopped, waiting for me to exit. I backed into the road as well, my eyes never leaving the rearview mirror. As soon as there was enough space, I threw the truck into drive and stepped on the gas pedal as far as it could go. My tires squealed and the truck roared as it ran through the gears. I was familiar with the roads and I was confident I could outrun him, if need be. As the truck looked like it was on its last legs, as the speedometer flew past 60, I could now see the man following us, but enough distance from my truck would be hard to put a hole in my tailgate. My girlfriend's calling down at this point and trying to rationalize what just happened to us. I drove and drove for several miles, constantly looking behind us to see if he was following. I remember doing over 100 an hour. At some point, the mood in the cab changed to utter disbelief, as we then talked about how crazy the supposed farmer looked, and awkwardly laughing off our near-deaths. I never saw that man again after, and I never returned to that abandoned house, except for the next day to leave him some ruts in the front yard of the rundown property. Looking back, I haven't the slightest idea as to how the man knew that we were there, as we weren't visible from the road, nor were we followed. I personally think that he was just some tweaker, as I knew most of the farmers in the area, and being in a small town, you know everybody. I have never seen this man before this experience, nor have I seen him since. Now, I certainly was in the wrong being on private property, and I heard horror stories of people running from Christ farmers as bullets flew over their heads. However, a couple of kids parked up in what was clearly a forgotten property, several hundred yards from the nearest field, really shouldn't have warranted a firearm pointed at me. And my girlfriend, who were just sitting in a clean truck that obviously hadn't been tearing up any fields, coming from a farming family myself, and being close with all the farmers in the area, the last thing you would catch me doing is tearing up someone's livelihood. Regardless though, I put my girlfriend's and my life at stake, just to go park up somewhere and be fooling around. I never made that mistake again. So this happened when I was about 17, and for reference, I'm a female. My story isn't as scary as some, but I'm reading as a cautionary tale. I was on my way home from school, and I normally walk 95% of the way home with two of my friends. They turned off one block right before I got to my house, but this day I was alone, because they both had missed school. I like to state that I was taught to always be aware of my surroundings. My parents were always on me about being safe, especially my mom, so I didn't walk around with my headphones in or anything like that. My neighborhood wasn't bad or anything, but being female, you know, you can never be too careful. On most, I was alone when I got home, and then I walked across the street to get my little brother from school when he got out. But that day, my dad was home because his car was in the shop. My mom was at work, so there was no car in the driveway. When I came home, I came in like always. Tossed my book bag on the floor. I didn't even bother to lock the front door. I just walked into the kitchen like always. I remembered that my dad was home, so I had opened in the back door and yelled out to him that I'm home. I don't even recall him answering back. I just went back and whatever, I guess. I was half paying attention anyway. My dad walked in just as the phone rang. It was like the neighbor from across the street. I'll refer to her as Patty. She was a nice lady that we had known for years. Her whole family lived in the two houses across from us. All really solid people. We always looked out for each other, helped out one another when we could. The way it should be, but rarely is. Nowadays, she told my dad that it was Patty and asked him if I was okay. He just responded with, yeah? Why? Well, Patty told him that she noticed two men follow me into the yard as I came in from school. She couldn't see them when I went up to the door, but she said they were behind me a few feet, but I hurried out of the yard about a minute or so later. I'm guessing that was when I went into the kitchen and told my dad that I was home. My dad then asked if she saw which way they went, Patty said that they walked around the corner and made it right. My dad thanked her and hung up. He told me someone followed me home, and he grabbed his keys. I was so confused it took me a minute to understand what was happening. My dad told me to lock the doors, and he then took off. I was so scared I didn't want my dad to get in trouble if he caught those guys, because God only knows what he would have done to them. But even more so, I didn't want him getting hurt by some chance they had weapons or something. He came back a short time later. He told me that he drove around the neighborhood a bit and even stopped at Patty's to ask what they looked like, but nothing came of it. I'm telling this story because I want to remind people to be cautious, especially the females that are out there. I really thought I was being careful, but apparently I wasn't making sure. You glance around while you walk. If you pass someone, make it a point to look them in the eyes. Let them know that you see them. Please be safe, everyone. I know that I was lucky that day. On any other day, it might not have been the same case. So the story started when I was 14. I'm 17 now, so I used to play in the park with my friends. I had a crush on a boy who was 14 as well, who used to play with us, and he had too crushed on me. And he had a friend who was older than him, 16 or 17 maybe. So we all used to play together. I always saw my crush's friend as a brother, but his feelings for me were not appropriate. He liked me, so one day on my birthday he randomly approached me and told me that he loved me. I replied that I did not have the same feelings for him and liked someone else. He did not take the no as a good answer. Now that's when the creepy part started. I recently joined Instagram and somehow found he had an Insta ID and began messaging about how he loved me. I rejected him multiple times, but he just wouldn't stop. So I blocked him. Now he started to make multiple Insta accounts to stalk me and message me from each one of them, and I kept blocking him. I was annoyed and enraged at this point and threatened him that I would report him to the cyber police. So he took up his ego and kind of started following me at places. He would take the same route as mine, knew the timings about when I was going to the park, when I was going to buy groceries. So whenever I went out of the house, he would creepily stare and continue ogling until I was out of his sight. He won't even budge his eyes for a second. When I used to play, I stopped playing with him, but he continuously roamed around me and stared. Now I was scared to a point where I started hesitating to go out of the house. Whenever I saw him, my heart would drop. I started hyperventilating. I thought this was only me who found him creepy, but when my mom was like, "Who is that guy who always roams around you? He doesn't give me good vibes. Try to stay away from him." I was like, "Yup, he is bad. And you know that? That person is not very good if your mother's instincts sense something fishy." This went on for a whole 2 years, and his staring or messaging and stalking from a fake account didn't stop. He even went to the extent to manipulate a friend of mine and my crush, who I started dating, that I was a slut. We didn't break up though. That's when I had enough and decided to take action. I went straight to the bastard and slapped him right into his face. To this day, whenever I hear his name or see his picture, I get a panic attack, and my hands and legs start shaking in fear. In fact, he was sexually attracted to one of my friends, and asked her if he could see her breast. She was too scared to do anything to him or tell any adult. Please be safe out there, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed those stories, and I love sharing them with you. With that said, I hope you all enjoy, and as always, stay brave.